All right, welcome to this episode of Phototheology. I'm your host, Doug, and we have another great episode of Phototheology, and we're going to be dealing with the Nikon D800E going up against the Pentax, the K5 II. Now, you're going to see some stats. It's going to say Pentax K5 2S, and the reason for that are the stats are the same. And I didn't want to go through and actually recreate a thing just for that. I didn't want to waste my time doing that. So I just threw up the K5 II stats because they're literally the same, or the K5 2S stats because they're literally the same as the K5 II. Except for the autofocusing is supposed to be a little bit faster, but those stats actually come from the K5 anyways, because the stats in terms of autofocusing and stuff like that haven't been tested properly for either of the cameras. Anyways. Okay, so here we are, a resolution test. There are quite a few people who will look at a Pentax and will say, well, you know what? I go with the full frame and not the Pentax because of the higher resolution. Yeah, okay. This is where I'm going to tell you to look and weep. All right? For every naysayer there ever was about the Pentax sensor and its ability to be interpolated to produce a true high-resolution image. Here you go. We're talking 36 megapixels. D800 utterly gets just wiped out. It gets wiped out. There's no two ways about this. It's just as sad can be. Not only can it not keep up in terms of the color, your contrast, your dynamic range, your white balance, the whole 9 yards. It just doesn't have it. This is where Pentax shines the most, because typically what I will do, okay, and you definitely see this in certain aspects of the picture, but anyways, typically what I will do is I will reduce the resolution of the full frame sensor, giving it the advantage. I normally give the full frame sensor the advantage in terms of resolution because you're compressing the pixels, so on and so forth. So the flaws are not seen from that end, okay, of it being at a full resolution, condensing the image down. But here, no, I didn't do that at all. Here, what I ended up doing was I boosted up the, resolution of the Pentax. So here's how it plays out. $1,000 body versus $3,000, $3,300 body, depending on how you buy it. Okay, then of course you have the lenses that factor in, and then I could go on and on about the other things. Okay, mechanically the Pentax is superior if you're talking about from a shooting end. From a video end, okay, first off, the Pentax's video is phenomenal. All right, I had mentioned with the Sony A99 that the video aspects of a camera are directly in correlation with its picture-taking aspects, and it is completely true. It is completely true. In other words, if you can't do proper light zoning, if you can't have the proper colors, the contrast, the dynamic range while you're taking a picture, there's no way on earth you're going to be able to do that when you have a video. All you got to do is look at, like, for example, the Canon, the Canon Rebel T1, or not the T1. I'm sorry. What am I talking about? The Canon Rebel T4i. That's all I gotta do. Look at that thing, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But anyways, when you're talking about this matchup here between the Nikon and the Pentax, the reason why I didn't do the Pentax K5 2S was because after looking at the results of the Sony, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go with the perfected sensor setup that the Nikon D7000 has / Pentax K5 had. And this is what the K5 II has. Okay, it's a perfected version of those sensor setups. So I decided to do that, and I wanted to see how it would really play out up against the full frame aspect of where Sony wasn't willing to go and where Nikon was willing to go in terms of the 36 megapixel, effective resolution that you see here. So as you see, the results are spectacular on the Pentex's end. I mean, there really is no excuse that you could possibly give to this from Nikon, except for, like I said in the last episode, they should have taken longer. They need to sit up here and really think about what they're developing when they're developing it. There's no reason why a YouTube episode should ever come up and their camera gets badly beaten by basically a factor of 3. It shouldn't happen like that. And I'm talking in terms of price. These are the kind of things you look at and you wonder, why do people even own full frame units to begin with? And there are reasons for owning full frame units. I mean, in terms of the craftsmanship of the unit, when you talk about power management, when you talk about the crop factor in terms of depth of field and how all that stuff plays out, there are reasons. Don't get me wrong. There are reasons to doing it. But this is not helping them in that argument. And here's another way I would tell you to look at this, okay? If they can't build the D800 correctly, or the D800E correctly, then why in the world am I going to sit up here and worry about the 4D that they have? Why am I going to sit up here and worry about that? I think I got the name right of it. But anyways, I'm thinking about other stuff as I'm doing this, so I'm doing 2 things at once here actually. But why am I going to sit up here and worry about that model? What would make me want to invest in a manufacturer that can't build their second best camera in their newest lineup out? That to me just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And here I'm putting it up against Pentex's supposedly second best unit that they have out. Now, a lot of people will look at this and they'll say, okay, all right, so are you going to do the Canon Mark III? And I replied in the other video, I really don't see a point in doing the Canon Mark III simply because the Pentax was able to beat up the Canon Mark III on the ISO performance. Because when you factor in price versus the fact that they were virtually the same, there was no reason for me to go any further with that. Here it's actually the same thing, to tell you the truth. I don't see a point in worrying about the Canon Mark III because the Pentax K5 II has already done what it needs to do against the Nikon. It's one of those kind of things. And unfortunately, this is the reality of those people who invested in the Nikon, D800E and the Nikon D800. And I was actually thinking about this, and one of these things that really gets to me is when you go onto these review sites, right, and you go and you read what they say, and they say, oh, the camera has a nice image except for, that kind of thing. Have you ever noticed when you sit up here and see the just basic JPEG shots of the Nikon D800, how you look at the sky and you see the artifacts right there in the sky of the solid blues and stuff like that? And I've noticed that about the 800 and the 800E. And it's not just that. I mean, there are other things that I could sit up here and pick apart as well. Now, part of it, the argument's going to be said, well, Doug, it's a JPEG shot, and it's not a RAW shot. That argument tends to be made. But I look at it in a sense of the camera costs $3,000, and you're touting the fact that it is a 36 megapixel unit, and that it is going to give me unparalleled resolution in comparison to anything else. Now, the reality is this. Okay, here's the reality to it, all right? If I take a Fuji, I don't have those issues. If I take a Sony, I don't have those issues. I take a Pentax, I don't have those issues. And if I interpolate the resolution, I'm still not having those issues. So this idea of the camera's allowed to be lack thereof in a certain scenario simply because of the file format that I use is totally bogus. It's a completely, totally bogus argument, because if it's lack thereof in one area, then how is it realistically going to be better in another area if we're talking about file format and I want to say the way it builds its picture, so on and so forth? This is ultimately what is wrong with Nikon at this point in time in the way that they actually build their SLRs. This is one of the big things. Like I said, this is the kind of manufacturer that really does need to take a step back and say, okay, what are we doing with our SLRs? How are they playing across the board? It is true that their sales are, the best or second best. That's true. But at one point in time, I remember Kodak not long ago, at one point in time in the digital camera market, they were, on top of sales and all that. And then in 1 year, they lost 33% of their market. And the reason why they lost their market share was due to the fact that they were building poor units and people caught on to it. Now, this is something you guys should be taking for food for thought. Because imagine if you were one of those people that invested in Kodak, and you got one of those little printer setups with a camera, and, you're trying to go out and find the supplies, and now you can't find the supplies. Because, retailers have pulled away from them, they decided to sell off some of their patents or do whatever the hell they decided to do their thing. It's not to say that something like this can't happen to Nikon eventually. And if you're one of these people that have invested thousands upon thousands upon thousands in their gear, well then, I don't know what to tell you. Except, you should be concerned about something like this. Alright, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.